The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight. So, welcome to the Weird Tales Radio Show, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic, and folklore. And now, here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Weird Tales Radio Show. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm your host, Charles Christian, and before we crack on with the main part of the show, what have I been doing since the last time? Well, I've been nurturing my inner druid. I obtained a kit, that's the technical term for it, for putting mistletoe onto trees so I can grow my own mistletoe berries for Christmas. I know, sounds sad. Interesting stuff. The inside of the berries, basically you rub the berries on young branches. The inside of the berries is full of this super glue-like gunk that feels like it's come out of the alien xenomorph. Very hard to get off your fingers, and obviously super glue for gluing the seeds to the suitable trees. What else did I learn? Well, strangely, although we tend to associate the druids with oak trees and the like, the most popular trees are apple, hawthorn, rowan, maple, cotoneaster, lime trees, horse chestnuts, poplars, willows, and medlars and quinces. And the other interesting fact is that certainly in the UK, most mistletoe doesn't grow in the wild. It grows in gardens, orchards, and parkland. If you add all those together, 75% comes from gardens, orchards and parkland, and the rest is hedgerows, field and generally wild, and a mere 1% is grown in churchyards. What else can I tell you? Well, apparently it's very slow growing. This is assuming the little seeds that I've glued with their own gunk to the branches actually germinate and thrive, and I can anticipate about 4 to 5 years before the first berries appear. So tune into this show in the year 2024 and I'll tell you whether I've got any mistletoe. Right, on with the show. Right, here's Janie with some seasonal folklore.
Yes, because we're coming into Hot Cross Bun and pancake season. Are we not?
Not pancakes, no.
Oh, when's Shrove Tuesday then? Have I missed it?
About 6 weeks ago. Yes, we're bringing you today's news and yesterday's news
Yes.
and several months ago's news.
Well, all right, I'll stick to what I know about Hot Cross Buns.
Okay.
Can't even seem to speak this morning. Anyway, yes, they've been around a long time. And they're still around. Because they're an English tradition, basically. I don't know if they're traditional anywhere else. But anyway, in England, we try to eat them on Good Friday. Although sometimes you can get them all year round, actually. But so I expect you're desperate to know the origins of Hot Cross Buns, aren't you?
Desperate.
Yeah. Nobody knows.
Oh, thank you. Goodbye.
Well, it's not very obvious, but apparently there were quite a lot of different types of cakes that were special to Good Friday. In fact, they even used to have triangular cakes. The madness. Can you imagine? Triangular cakes. Might be quite good because you could bite off each corner and work your way inwards. And Yeah, but the earliest exact reference to hot cross bun was 1733.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a little rhyme that really is not worth bothering with. But anyway, it says, Good Friday comes this month. The old woman runs with 1 or 2 a penny hot cross buns. Sort of rhymes, doesn't it?
It does.
But, yeah, because marking the food with a cross wasn't actually always just confined to Good Friday buns. And right up until the early years of the 20th century, it was quite normal practice when baking bread to mark the dough with a cross before putting it into the oven. And that actually comes right from back in the mid-13th century. And then in pre-Reformation England, it would be quite commonplace to make the sign of the cross over all food in preparation and before eating. Goose at Michaelmas and mince pies at Christmas. I mean, they all, like the buns, attract superstitions. For instance, good luck will accompany all those who follow the custom of eating foods at a certain time. And bad luck will result from a failure to partake. And the hot cross bun is no exception.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Got to eat your buns.
Get down to Greg's and get your buns.
Get your bum down to Greg's.
Yeah. Yeah, as I say, it's good luck to actually eat a cake, which I'm finding is quite cheering, isn't it?
Yes.
However, the poor old hot cross bun has come under a bit of pressure from several directions. In 2003, in March, the Times reported that 4 local councils have decided to ban them from their schools because they might offend children of other religions. Anyway, the bun has attracted ingenious but quite mad speculations about its ancient pagan origins, even though, obviously, it's bearing the overtly Christian symbol of a cross and being sold on the day of Christ's crucifixion. But this apparently has prompted several devout Christians to refuse them. Perhaps the craziest fancy is that it's tried to be proved that hot cross buns' remote origins is based on the similarity of the word bun to the ancient Greek word boon, which apparently was a cake of 2 horns offered to the gods at archite temples every 7th day. So,
Sounds like a croissant, actually.
But in fact, bun is of uncertain derivation and has only been recorded in English since 1371.
Yeah.
Nothing is sacred, is it? Even the word bun, there's confusion about it.
Yep.
Yes, apparently the Oxford English Dictionary explains that although the word has various shades of meaning in different parts of the country, a basic definition for usage in England is a sweet cake, usually round, not too large to be held in the hand while being eaten, which I'm going to go with that.
Yep.
Yep. So we've sorted that one out, everybody.
Good.
Hot cross buns and even bun.
Good.
But there's more.
Oh, right.
Apparently, there's quite a widespread belief found in many parts of England in the 19th century that said that bread or buns baked on Good Friday would never grow mouldy. See, I get a lot of acid reflux when I eat buns, hot cross buns. I'm wondering if they coat them in something nasty and chemical. Anyway, apparently, no. They were also believed to have curative powers for many complaints, particularly of the stomach and digestive system.
Which is kind of ironic.
It is ironic, based on my personal experience of hot cross buns. They're quite sugary, aren't they? And then they've got that peel in. Why do they put peel in? Disgusting food of the devil. Anyway, but some people like it, of course. Anyway, the usual way to preserve this Good Friday bread was to hang it by a string from the kitchen ceiling, and when you needed a piece, it would be grated or soaked in water to be drunk by the patient. Another suspicion was, it's not so common, but it's quite widespread, if something can be like that, held that eggs were similarly incorruptible. And apparently there was a letter in Notes and Queries that confirmed it. And this note said, "Last Christmas, a lady told one of her nearest relations that if an egg laid on Good Friday is kept without being disturbed, it will be generally perfectly fresh at the time when the Christmas pudding is made." She stated that she'd proved this. Out of pure curiosity, my relation placed on Good Friday, last March, an egg laid by one of her hens on that day in an egg cup and put it in a cupboard in her drawing room, where it remained untouched until December the 1st, when it was broken and used in the Christmas pudding. This is this person who wrote it, in case you've lost the thread. "I can vouch that when the egg was broken, there was no smell, except that of a fresh egg, which, in all one could judge, it appeared to be." Sorry, not believing that. Unless you coated the egg in something, because apparently, the Chinese 1,000-year eggs, quite a delicacy. Mm-hmm. The reason they lasted, they coated them with something, which was sort of, I don't know, perhaps didn't let air in. Yeah. I don't know what it was. They're very old superstitions, and they're sort of in line with other beliefs that edibles associated with Christian ceremonies, such as wine and wafers of communion, and the water used in baptism, also possesses similar medicinal powers. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, not entirely unheard of. Again, it's actually just the same thing, that the idea that bread could be protective goes back to 1827. And there was an entry in William Hone's Everyday Book. And it says, "In the houses of some ignorant people," gosh, they were so rude, weren't they? "A Good Friday bun is still kept for luck, and sometimes there hangs from the ceiling a hard biscuit-like cake of open crosswork baked on a Good Friday, to remain there till displaced on the next Good Friday by one of similar make, and it is affirmed that it preserves the house from fire, and no fire ever happened in a house that had one." Ooh. How extraordinary and quite bonkers is that? Well, here we go.
There we go.
Yeah.
And before you go, we've got our own bit of folklore coming up, haven't we? Because we've taken our DNA tests to find out our origins.
We're on tenterhooks on the edge of our seat
with
bated breath.
Yes. And several other cliches.
Yes, well, the good thing is, you see, I know what some of my history, background, origins are, but they wouldn't, because, of course, my name has changed. Mm-hmm. If they knew my maiden name, they'd be able to work it out.
Yes.
So I
we
think
won't say your maiden name.
No, we're not going to say it. No. No, but it's just interesting, I think, that unless there's some bombshell, that I will know whether there's accuracy to some extent there. Mm-hmm. So it's quite interesting. Whereas you, of course, we know nothing.
Gypsies, tramps and thieves. Probably literally.
Yeah. So any idea how long that will before that comes?
Couple of weeks, I think.
Oh, all right. Oh, they do a good job then.
Yeah, they run your DNA through 30 different tests.
Wow. Yeah, so it'll be fun. It's one of those things we just did for a bit of fun.
Yes.
No particular point whatsoever.
No.
Although Obviously, I've got relatives and young relatives. They might be interested to know because they would have my DNA or genes. I'm not really
Yes.
sure. DNA, genes, are they the same thing?
Yes.
Okay. Right.
Thank you very much.
We will keep you posted.
We will indeed. Thank you, Janie.
You're welcome. Something wicked this way comes. Weird Harvest Press presents Harvest Hymns, the sweet fruits and twisted roots of folk horror, a 2-volume set of books investigating the music of folk horror, featuring contributions from some of the biggest names in the field: Candia McCormack, Johnny Trunk, Maddie Pryor, Sharon Krause, Jim Jupp and Kemper Norton, to name just a few. Available now via lulu.com. 100% of all Weird Harvest Press profits are donated to wildlife charities.
Welcome, fool. You have come of your own free will to the appointed place. It is time to keep your appointment with the Wicker Man. The Wicker Man.
March comes in like a lion and goes out like a lamb. We've all heard that phrase, and it's an example of weather lore. And I've been looking into this topic, both weather lore and love divination. I suppose you could say it: red sky at night, sailor's delight, but will he still love you tomorrow? We tend to forget in the modern digital age, where there's now an app for everything, or at least it seems that way, that we forget for most of humanity's time on this planet, we had to rely on quasi-magical rituals and lore to provide guidance of the things that we nowadays take for granted. Lonely and looking for love? Just fire up a dating app. Find the man or woman of your dreams. Planning an activity or job that's dependent on good weather? Check out the weather on your app on your phone. And of course, before we moved into the current digital era, we had Lonely Hearts columns in newspapers and magazines. Indeed, a surprising number of people now living in what, in the mid-19th century, were still considered the frontier states of North America, are descended from so-called mail-order brides. As for weather, firstly newspapers, then radio, then finally television have all carried weather reports and bulletins, and still do to this day. But all this is just scratching the surface of our history. Go back in time to beyond the mid-19th century, to an era, in the Western world at least, before widespread literacy and the availability of cheap newspapers. All these communication platforms were unavailable, leaving people with nothing but tradition and custom to guide them. So let's look at weather lore. So we've already mentioned March, which comes in like a lion and goes like a lamb. Before that, we had February, the month of February. February Fildike, be it black or be it white. But if it's white, it's better to like. What on earth does that mean? Well, broadly translated, it means February is typically a dry month, so any rain or snow melt to fill the ditches, black with mud or white with snow, is good for underground water sources as the spring crop growing season approaches. And at least if it snows, it's a bit prettier to look at. The Spanish Portuguese have a similar saying: if in February there be no rain, 'tis neither good for hay nor grain. Then we've got this month, April. If April blows its horn, that means it's windy, it'll bring forth hay and corn. There are literally hundreds of these rhymes and sayings, and there are variations can be found in most cultures, and the vast majority of them have an agricultural flavour. Because, for most of our history, we lived in agrarian societies where the majority of the population worked on the land and, more importantly, where the success or failure of crops could mean the difference between life or death from starvation during a famine. Let's look at a few more of these. Snow like cotton, soon forgotten. Snow like meal, that's oatmeal, it'll snow a great deal. As every child wistfully looking out through the schoolroom window wondering, will it lay, knows, those big fluffy snowflakes soon melt and turn to slush, whereas the smaller, denser white stuff will lay and provide ammunition for snowball fights and the like. Here's another one going back a bit earlier. If Candlemas Day, that's the 2nd of February, be dry and fair, then half of the winter's to come and more. If Candlemas Day be wet and foul, then half the winter's gone at Yule. And then there's that old favourite, red sky at night, sailor's delight. Red sky in the morning, sailor's warning. This is obviously a regional one. I grew up in a seaport town, so it was always sailors, but I know a lot of you believe the saying is shepherds. What's interesting about all these weather law sayings is although they may seem like wise old ways of predicting the weather, they're in fact based upon historical observation that have been handed down over the years and in some instances centuries. For example, a red sky in the evening often does mean a fine day will follow, whereas a red sky in the morning frequently portends stormy weather. Similarly, February Fildike is actually just plain common sense, because if February is dry, it does threaten spring crops with an early drought. And the reason why our ancestors used these rhymes to pass on their weather law to their descendants, future generations, was because it was an easily memorable form. So, of course, this was at a time when most people could neither read nor write. There's two other comments worth noting here. The first is there is an element of selective memory at work here, in that, for example, people tend to remember all the days when the red sky in the evening was followed by a fine day, but forget those when the following day saw bad weather. And this historical approach to weather prediction actually echoes the way modern meteorologists operate. Of course, they now have weather balloons, satellite imagery and computer modelling, but underlying it all are decades of historical data from which historical statistical trends can be projected. So, for example, they know that if in late January, early February, which is Candlemas in weather law, if it's good weather, there is a statistical likelihood of another belt of wintry weather still to come. Whereas if December and January/early February have had bad weather, the worst of the winter is over. But I hear you say, what about St. Swithin's Day on the 15th of July? The rhyme, which dates back to at least the 13th century, says, St. Swithin's Day, if it do rain, for 40 days it will remain. St. Swithin's Day, if it be fair, for 40 days it will rain no more. Now, it's a clear prediction of what the weather will be until the 23rd of August, that's the 40 days. But just how accurate is it? The answer is, sadly, not very, as statistical data suggests that regardless of whether or not it rains on St. Swithin's Day, the next 40 days will contain some days in which it rains and others which it is dry. There's also a regional element here at work in the UK, so the Western Highlands of Scotland can expect as much as 35 days of rain in the St. Swithin's 40-day period, where the eastern counties can expect hardly any rain. It also is the peak of the summer vacation season, so tabloid newspapers tend to make a lot of fuss if it does rain on the 15th of July. Lots of moaning that the summer is ruined. But once again, selective memory sets in. We soon forget the accuracy or otherwise of prediction. There is a more serious point here, which is may have been that what our ancestors were trying to pass on to us, which modern meteorologists and weather forecasters will confirm, is that in the UK, weather often does become locked into a particular pattern during the high summer, only changing when the first autumnal influences begin to appear in the late August period. So it's a fair bet that what the weather is like on St. Swithin's Day is going to be what the weather will be like for the next 40 days. However, by way of a curious coda, there's also a tradition that in some parts of England that apple crops will not be good unless St. Swithin christens them with a rain shower on the 15th. And if you're wondering why apples tend to feature so much in English folklore, it's because of cider making, when cider was far safer to drink than water in most areas. Of course, it all prompts the question, who was St. Swithin and what did he know about predicting the weather? The answer is nothing. He was the Bishop of Winchester in the 9th century and was credited with many miracles. When he died, or at least just before he died, he asked to be buried in the cathedral churchyard, where the sweet rain of heaven may fall upon my grave. Unfortunately, his successor thought he was far too important to be buried in such a casual fashion and had his remains removed into a magnificent shrine within the cathedral, whereupon it started raining and continued raining for 40 days and 40 nights until his remains were moved back outside. And what about love divination? Love divinations are another plentiful source of folklore, some of which we still perform today because we're unaware of the origins. Remember counting the plum or cherry stones, or prune stones necessary, in a pudding and placing them around your plate? Tinker, tailor, soldier, sailor, rich man, poor man, beggar man, thief. We still used to do that at my old boys' grammar school in the 1960s, oblivious to the fact it actually began as a way for women to divine the career of their future husbands. Similarly, this year, next year, sometimes never, determines the wedding date when the bride will be dressed in silk, satin, muslin or rags. To understand the importance of love divination in bygone centuries, and more importantly, why it's almost exclusively a ritual among young women, need to appreciate until modern times, marriage was the only way women could improve their prospects. Women had little or no property rights. With the exception of going to service and becoming a servant, there were few career options open to them, and in rural areas they were frequently resented by even their own family, as was there another person to feed, clothe and house, yet could not perform the same amount of manual labour as a man. Whether they were rich or poor, their greatest fear was being left on the shelf and dying an old maid. It also goes without saying that modern and, by Western standards, totally acceptable concepts of casual sexual relationship or living with partners were totally out of the question in the discriminatory, chauvinistic moral values of earlier times. Divination therefore provided a distraction, a way in which women could hope they might find true love and marry the man of their dreams. Intriguingly, and possibly a link back to pre-Reformation times when saints' days and feast days in the Roman Catholic calendar were also opportunities for merrymaking and holidays from work, many of the love divination rituals are associated with specific dates. Along with St. Valentine's Day, 14th of February, Christmastide, New Year, 12th night, kissing beneath the mistletoe, etc. Other popular dates included St. Agnes' Eve on the 20th of January. She's the patron saint of virgins. St. Mark's Eve, the 24th of April. St. Luke's Day, the 18th of October. Halloween, the 31st of October. And St. Thomas's Eve, the 20th of December. Some rituals merely involve fasting before going to bed and then saying a short prayer in the hope of seeing their future husband in their dreams. Here's one. St. Agnes, be a friend to me. In the gift I ask of thee. Let this night my husband see. Oh, this one. Good Sir Thomas, do me right. Send me my true love this night. Others are distinctly odd. For example, in Derbyshire it was said that if a girl walks backward to a pear tree on Christmas Eve and walks around the tree 3 times, she will see an image of her future husband. Of course, she may just be dizzy. And then those are which are, to put it politely, a little bit rude. There's a 1685 chapbook called Mother Bunch's Closet Newly Broke Open, where women are advised to take marigold flowers, marjoram, thyme, wormwood, then mix, dry and pound all this into a powder, simmer with honey and vinegar over a slow fire. Then the woman should go to bed naked and anoint her stomach, breasts and lips while repeating the following verse 3 times. St. Luke, be kind to me. In dreams let my true love see. Incidentally, an earlier writer commented that St. Valentine's Day was good for finding lovers, whereas St. Luke's Day was best for choosing husbands. To modernise, one of the oddest aspects of love divination is the relationship to Halloween. Today it's indelibly associated with ghosties, ghoulies, fancy dress parties and trick-or-treating. But in earlier times, and at least up till the later years of the 19th century, it was also an occasion for women to hold parties and play divination games. Not least as it was believed to be a liminal time when the boundaries between the real world and the other world of magic and the supernatural were more porous. For example, after bobbing apples, each woman would par an apple, peel it with an apple with a knife, and then whirl the peel 3 times around their head, throwing it over their left shoulder. The tradition was the letter formed by the apple peel as it hit the floor would spell the initial of her future husband. Yeah, once again, plenty of opportunity for wishful thinking. Oh, I'm sure that's an R for Richard I see there on the letter on the floor. There's also a young woman going to bed on Halloween was supposed to be able to see the image of her future husband looking back at her if she held a candle up to a mirror. And then there was the game where each woman would place a line of hazelnuts on the hot grate of a fire, giving each one the nut of the nuts the name of a prospective lover or husband. The woman would then recite the words, "If you love me, pop and fly. If you hate me, burn and die." I leave you, pop and fly means the nut would burst and jump as opposed to just smoulder on it. And I leave you with this final tradition from Devon, where it was said that if a young woman tapped on the door of a hen house at midnight, if the hens cackled, then she would never marry. However, if the cock crowed, she would marry before the end of the year. I leave the Freudian interpretation of the crowing cock to you.
If you want to grow your business, save time using the latest tech, and look great online, Weird Appeal Digital can help. We have a free, yes, that's free download listing 40 digital tools, apps and resources to help you grow your brand, promote your project, generate leads and reach your audience. Just go to www.appeal.digital/weirdtales. For smart, effective digital design and your free download, go to www.appeal.digital/weirdtales.
And that's it. We're out of time. Thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you'll join us again next time. Just one final thought. I spotted on Twitter a little definition. It said, "Tradition, it's just peer pressure from dead people." Yeah, I like that. Anyway, we'll be back next time, and until then, stay well, stay weird, stay different. Good night.
Black Shuck, the demon dog of East Anglia, is baying at the moon, which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic and folklore. You can keep in touch with us online at www.weirdtalesradio.com, by email to weirdtales@icloud.com, and on Twitter @urbanfantasist. Join us again next week for another edition of the Weird Tales radio show. Good night.